Today on Detroit Muscle. So you've spent a pile of cash on a big bad power plant. Today we're going to show you how to protect that investment with our Powerstop Ultimate Challenger. Then we'll hop on our Monster Mercury for some low buck fixes you can do at home.
Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Now we're getting dangerously close to taking our old Challenger out for a test drive. Now we've got several loose ends that we're going to have to tie up today. We're going to be under it, up here in the engine compartment, out back, and we're going to address the outside today. We're going to be on this old Challenger like a rooster on a June bug. What do you think?
What? Our 2010 SRT8 Challenger has its work cut out. Our goal is to beat a Hellcat with it, and we started with suspension upgrades both front and rear, including beefier components like half shafts. We ratcheted up the stopping power with the setup from Powerstop brakes. And the guys down in engine power built us a monster Hemi from the factory block with forged internals, ported heads, and upgrades all around. Then we plugged it back into the SRT8 along with an upgraded transmission. We'll need that to handle the power she'll put down with this twin turbo setup for our stray cat project that we're calling the Powerstop Ultimate Challenger, which you can win by going to PowerNationTV.com. When you're building a car like this, you got a lot of money wrapped into it, say like a stroker engine like we've got, twin turbos, and never mind all the time and energy you spent putting it together. That's a big investment and you want to protect it. You wouldn't just go down to your local gas station and put the cheap stuff in the tank. And likewise, you shouldn't go to the store to get some oil and get the stuff from the bottom shelf.
There's a lot of reasons why not to do that, and our buddy Don with Pennzoil is here to elaborate on the subject just a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot going on inside the engine today that didn't happen years ago. And the oils today are being asked to do a lot of jobs that they weren't really designed to do in earlier years. So it's really important to pick a high quality oil that can clean, that can lubricate and cool the engine at the same time. So picking a high quality oil is really, really important.
Yeah, a lot of people may not realize, but many modern engines are engineered so that the oiling system can help out the cooling system. They have squirters inside of the engine that hit the bottom of the pistons and the cylinder walls to help reduce that temperature. And while we're on the subject of pistons and cylinders, another thing you need to think about is blow-by. Blow-by is when the pressure in the cylinder exceeds the sealing pressure of the piston rings. This happens in all engines, but it's a bigger issue in high compression engines and engines with power adders like turbos, blowers, and nitrous. The exhaust gases which escape past the rings are full of contaminants such as water, sulfuric acid, soot, and varnish. The engine oil has to deal with these impurities. And the task of high quality oil is to encapsulate these impurities before they have the opportunity to stick to the metal surfaces inside of the engine.
We just got through talking about blow-by and what all the engine oil has to contend with inside the crankcase. There's a couple of unique things we've done at Pennzoil. For example, with our Pennzoil Ultra Platinum line is make oil from natural gas. We designed an oil specifically for Mopar and the SRT8 program. The 0W40 Ultra Platinum was specifically designed with Mopar to work in SRT8. As a matter of fact, we're factory fill for all Mopars. And a very interesting thing, Elio Castronova uses it every weekend in his Indy car.
Conventional oil molecules are like rocks with many different shapes and sizes, containing many impurities. Synthetic oil is like ball bearings with more uniform molecules and better properties. Pennzoil synthetics are made by condensing natural gas down into a liquid, whereas traditional synthetics are refined from crude oil. What that means is that it starts out with a much cleaner foundation, which allows you to have a much cleaner end product.
If you've got a modern machine with a late model engine like our Hemi here in our Challenger, this synthetic oil is perfect for it. However, if you have a high performance engine with a flat tappet camshaft, you may want to look at Pennzoil's racing oil or even Rotella for that high zinc content. Remember earlier we were talking about blow-by. Now one of the side effects of blow-by is positive crankcase pressure. I'm sure you've heard of PCV system or positive crankcase ventilation system. How this works is the pressure from the crankcase goes past your PCV valve and it's sent through a hose or tube to the intake manifold. That goes back into your engine to be burnt. The problem with that on a high performance engine or a boosted application like ours is that will lower the effective octane rating of your fuel, and that can cause detonation, which is always bad. That's why you need a catch can like this one from Vibrant Performance, which will catch those fumes and keep that detonation from happening. Tommy made a snazzy little bracket here that will slip onto the coolant reservoir and get bolted up here at the front support. Then we can grab our catch can and get it mounted into place. We'll take some -10 Earl's PTFE line and snake it to the PCV valve, then get the other side attached to the can. Now we'll cap off the other side since we won't be needing that. We can unplug the stock PCV tube, then figure out where we need to cut the other end of our line. We'll clamp it down to the valve, then cap off the port that dumps the PCV fumes to the intake.
Well, with that done, and while we're up front, we want to go ahead and take care of a few consumables before we fill up the radiator. And that would be a couple of hoses and a belt. Since we're giving this thing away to one of you guys out there, we want to make sure that we use the best and most reliable parts. Now, just like engine oil, cheaping out on something like this in the long run could end up costing you an engine. Now, over time, hoses develop microscopic fractures, and picking one of those economy hoses, well, they're a little more prone to it, and we've all seen it. The hoses start to balloon up and burst. That ain't what you want. These hoses from Continental Elite are resistant to the fracturing that causes these failures, and they exceed OE specifications. Our application requires a factory fit, and they've got us covered there. If you've got a custom or oddball setup, you can get a set of universal ones as well. Now, as for a belt, this Continental Elite is engineered to be more quiet and tougher than your traditional Serpentine setup. And the way they do that is this varied cog size and this fiber-loaded backing. These belts have additional flexibility, and that reduces vibration. And they're gonna last a very long time to whoever's the lucky winner of the Powerstop Challenge.
Stick around and check out the exhaust that's gonna let our Stray Cat Challengers set off car alarms.
When it came to picking an exhaust system for our Stray Cat Challenger, we want something that would look nice, sound great, and be able to handle the amount of power we're going to be making. So we went to Magnaflow for one of its competition series catback exhaust systems. This is a stainless steel dual 3-inch system that is going to open up a lot of breathing room for our Hemi. It starts with this X-pipe, which is a proven power gainer, then moves back to these dual 14-inch resonators for a rich, deep sound. You can end it with dual dump outs or these 3.5-inch polished tips. I think we like those. We got our drive shaft in from G-Force Performance Engineering to make sure that everything will clear while we install this exhaust. We'll grab a couple of screw jacks to hold the back end up while we move to the next piece. We'll get the tailpipes poked into place, then install the tips, both of which are a snap to do. With the system properly aligned, we'll run down the clamps.
Now we can move on to bleeding the brakes with our Motive Products Power Bleeder. You can simply attach this hose to your brake fluid reservoir, link up the hose coupler, and then pump the handle to pressurize the system. You'll want to run it up to about 15 pounds of pressure. This pushes the fluid through the system and lets you bleed those brakes, no sweat.
Now it's time for the eye candy. Some of you guys at home may recognize this logo right here. These are HRE wheels. Now these are the P101s, and you're gonna pay a little bit more for these, but here's why. They're machined out of one piece of billet aluminum, which means they're stronger and lighter. Not to mention, they look really cool. For tires, we chose Continental's ContiSportContact 5s. Now, the reason we went with this tire is because it provides premium traction both in a straight line and in those turns without sacrificing things like tread life or fuel efficiency. Now we went with the 275/40/20, which is exactly the same size as on that Hellcat we're gunning after, just to be fair.
We pushed our Challenger off the lift so that we could check out our stance with those new wheels and tires, and I do believe we're on the right path. Now the next thing we're going to do is dial back some of that acreage of that bright red paint, and to do that we brought in Brand Imaging Group to help us out with it. But if you want to see that finished product, you're going to have to come back and see us.
Up ahead, it's a bottom dollar suspension fix that you might want to take a look at doing.
Hey guys, welcome back. Now we do have some things to button up on our Challenger, but for now, we're gonna jump back onto our Mercury project, the Highwayman. Now you remember last time we had some issues with the suspension and the brake systems, so we're gonna address those now. One of the things we noticed last time was the condition of our ball joints. Now you can see here the uppers, the boot is ripped and there's still grease in there, but a lot of grease has come out and it's probably let dirt and moisture in, so chances are that one's bad. Now the lower one, the boot is still intact, but if we're already gonna have the spindle off, might as well replace that one while we're at it.
Detroit Muscle presents Back to Basics, tips for the beginner gearhead.
When taking a look at your ball joints to see if they're bad, a visual inspection alone may not tell the whole story. For instance, the boot could still be good and the joint bad, and likewise, the boot could be torn, but the joint could still be good. So there's a way to check those, and we're gonna show you how. The reason we put that jack under the lower control arm is because we need to load the suspension. The reason why we need to do that is because at full droop, those ball joints are in a bind and we need to release that bind in order to be able to check them. Now our car's on a lift, but for you guys that are at home, you're gonna be doing this in your driveway with a floor jack. Make sure you jack it up enough where you can get your hands in here, use that tire as leverage.
When old Mark wiggles the tire top to bottom, if you look close, you can see this lower ball joint is moving. But if we look at the top one, it ain't nearly as bad.
And here's what we learned from checking the ball joints this way. Just because the boot is torn doesn't mean that ball joint's bad. And just because this boot's intact, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. Now we already said with this thing having 1,000 horsepower, we're just gonna go ahead and replace those uppers just to be safe. And now we know for sure those lowers are bad, we're gonna replace those as well.
First thing we got to get out of the way is the wheel, along with this rotor and spindle. Pull the dust cap off, wrangle that pin out of the way. Then you can get that rotor off as well. We'll grab some Scotch shop towels and get that old grease off there too. Then the tie rod end can be unbolted and a little kiss will release it. We'll pull this dust shield off too. It's just 3 bolts. The upper control arm can then be unfastened. And this is no sweat with an air spring system like we have. We'll get the lower arm undone too, then the spindle is free.
So on this upper ball joint here, I can see from underneath there's some studs that stick through that bolt the ball joint to the control arm, but I can't really tell how they're attached because of all this goo and dirt and mud that's stuck up here. I'm gonna have to get all that out of the way and see what's underneath. Now we got it all cleaned up, we can see now that's not a bolt at all, it's actually a rivet. So we're either gonna need to apply heat or pressure, or probably both. We'll start by drilling it with an 1/8 inch bit. Then we'll step it up to a 3/8 to finish drilling them. An air hammer with a forked bit chews those rivet heads right off of there. We'll grind off the little bit that the air hammer didn't get. Then a chisel bit on the air hammer can be slipped under the flange of the ball joint to break it off from the control arm. All right, so now we got the hard part done. We got the ball joint off. We just need to clean up what's left of those rivets here, get the new one on.
A punch bit on the air hammer can be used to persuade the remainder of those rivets out of there.
Now that we got the top one out, we got to get that bottom one out. It's basically the same process. I'm going to get that done now.
Hey guys, we got the front end of our Mercury all torn down, and with that stuff out of the way, this big rusty hole, well, it don't look so good. Well, the way we're going to solve that is with Rust Barrier by Dupli-Color. Now the application for this stuff is relatively easy, and it's going to make this hole look so much better. You want to begin by taking a wire brush and knocking the scale off of your surface. Then we'll blow it off real quick and bust out some degreaser to make sure there isn't any petroleum left on here to mess with our paint. Now we can begin brushing our paint on. This paint works as both a rust preventative and protectant. It can be laid down with a brush, roller, or HVLP spray gun. Once it's dried, you can see that our wheel welt looks a whole lot better. Alrighty, everything under here is all dry and we're ready to start reassembling the car. We've got a couple of ball joints from rockauto.com, and installation is super easy, especially whenever you compare to how much of a pain in the tail those old ones were to come out. Now you just got to bolt them in place, then you're ready to go.
You can use a screwdriver to gently push this rubber lip into its seat. Then a little twist can get the joint down in place. After that, 3 bolts is all it takes to put it at home. When it comes to the binders on our Mercury, we wanted to make sure we had a braking system that could bring that big old Merc to a stop safely and quickly. But there's really not a whole lot out there on the market for a 72 Mercury, without reinventing the wheel anyway. So what we did was we called up Powerstop brakes, and they actually cross-referenced their part numbers and found something that would work for us. These are the Z36 drilled and slotted rotors from Powerstop. They're built for heavy-duty applications and precision machined to OEM spec. The drilled holes keep the surface temperature up to 180 degrees cooler, and the slots keep that surface area clean. We're going to couple these with a really good set of pads, and that'll provide all the stopping power we need for our big Mercury. And since it's a direct fit, installation should be nice and easy.
Well, all right, we got our spindle and the backing plate all cleaned up and ready to go back together. Now, we're not going to bother with showing you how to put the caliper and the rotor and the rest of the brakes on, because you guys have seen us do it a whole bunch of times. Mr. Mark, we're getting pretty close to taking this old girl for a ride. What do you think?
I'm ready. You know, we've all seen somebody use those 1-inch wide ratcheting tie-down straps to secure a vehicle that's being trailered somewhere. And hopefully that wasn't you that we saw. But the fact of the matter is, those things just aren't heavy duty enough to handle something like the weight of a car, and you could wind up with a disaster on your hands. Summit Racing has these 2-inch heavy-duty tie-down straps and these Pro-Pack axle straps, which are perfect for transporting your vehicle from point A to point B. The kit comes in this handy tool bag, and you can get it at Summit Racing for about 130 bucks.
If you're looking to clean up an old motor, old parts, or heck, anything on a car that accumulates a bunch of that greasy, grimy junk, you might want to take a look at this. GUNK is an all-purpose cleaner and degreaser that's designed to break up the toughest grease and oil. This stuff will cut through dirt and grease without damaging plastic surfaces or etching aluminum. For everyday use, you can dilute this down to 35-1. If you're cleaning the shop floor, go 20-1. Or you can go straight out of the bottle if you're trying to clean up something super nasty. We're all out of time today, so you all keep it between the ditches.